thank you for the remarks. For the challenges and the opportunities faced by globalization, we have heard a lot of words of wisdom. The impacts of companies are very important. Now we're going to launch a report by CCG. Mr. Zhang Gui is going to launch a new report by CCG, Trends in U.S.-China Relations and its Impact on MNCs in China. It's a great pleasure for me to launch this report, Trends in U.S.-China Relations and the Implications on MNCs in China. So, since 2018, the Trump administration launched the trade war against China and also began decoupling of people-to-people and science and technology exchanges. When Biden administration came into office and didn't change this policy, and in some areas it's been deepened. So in these contexts, MNC's business in China, what's the implications for MNC's business in China, where they decide to move outside of China? That's a focal point. That's a very important focus of this research. So we study major MNCs in China. Our methodologies have quantitative and qualitative analysis, and we established some recommendations for policymakers and businesses. So this study covers the background, the research methodologies, implications on MNCs in China, and part 4, there's some case studies, and then there's the policy recommendations. So let me just share with you some highlights of this study. In the context of the trade war and trade negotiations between China, in January of 2020, China and U.S. signed the trade agreement and reflected some agreements and attitudes of both countries. And CIR and the regional comprehensive partnership ASEP is also part of the context. In the Biden administration's era, that's also another part of the context. So in terms of the macro environment, the impact on MNCs in China is positive. The Chinese government has taken some countermeasures and continue to open up. And this has affected by decoupling in science and technology. The business of major science and technology companies in China will be affected in the foreseeable future. What are the implications on MNCs in China? So, since the new round of opening up in 1992, MNCs entered a stage of fast development in China, and by the end of 2019, we utilized more than $2 trillion foreign investment, and foreign invested companies created jobs for about 40 million people, accounting for 1/10 of total jobs in China, and contributing 1/6 of tax revenues and 2/5 of exports and imports. Investment from China has been stable. Between 1987 and 2019, U.S. has been the major source of foreign investment in China. It increased from $260 million to $2.69 billion. In the 21st century, the ratio of U.S. investment in all foreign investment in China decreased, but we are seeing a recovery in recent years. The main risks for MNCs is trade friction between China and U.S. In general, the tariff sanctions has limited impacts on U.S. invested companies in China exports to the U.S., but there is an impact on supply chain. The decoupling of in science and technology brought in uncertainties, and biggest impact is on investment by high-tech companies. China has established the list of unreliable entities in response to the entity list of the U.S. And this has already had a major impact on the supply of semiconductors globally. The lack of the shortage of semiconductors actually lead to the stoppage of production of certain automobile companies. And to avoid the competition in science and technology, the China and the U.S. can continue cooperation in climate change, sustainable development, fight against the pandemic. In 2021, the U.S. launched a number of acts against China. The return of manufacturing to the U.S. will it weaken the willingness of U.S. companies to invest in China to some extent. Trade frictions increased uncertainties of supply chain of the U.S. companies in China, and actually encourage MNCs to review the prospects of return to the U.S. homeland. On the other hand, China has its advantage in manufacturing capabilities and market. So it's very unlikely for U.S. companies to return to the U.S. And also we have to consider the impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. MNCs still think the Chinese market thinks highly of the Chinese market. We did some case studies of foreign invested companies in China. So we have some new findings of adjustment of U.S. companies in China. So our basic finding is that the changes to China-U.S. relations have not caused any Fortune 500 U.S. companies to withdraw from China, but we are seeing new entrants into China. But this has always been a headache for U.S. companies in China. For the Fortune, it has caused companies to change their strategies in China and globally. Fortune 500 U.S. companies in China, mostly they tend to be cautious, and the biggest voice is in support of normalization of China-U.S. relations. But I would say the statistics are limited. Our survey does not cover many other well-known companies. Our conclusion, the changes in U.S.-China relations have some impacts on large MNCs, especially in terms of tariffs, and this leads to increase of procurement cost for certain U.S. companies. So MNCs have maintained their business in China, and some also adopt a wait-and-see attitude. But most companies have not withdrawn from China, and on the contrary, attracted by the Chinese market and the policies. More than 40% of the MNCs increased their business in China. The high-tech MNCs business in China have been hit the hardest, and the China-U.S. relations, and especially the decoupling policy of the U.S. entity list and the sanctions, actually cut off the cooperation between U.S. high-tech companies and Chinese companies, and they had to withdraw certain business from China. So our recommendation is that for MNCs, especially for high-tech MNCs, we need to create better business environment for them, and we need to establish a cooperation mechanism with U.S. and Europe in digital economy. We need to strengthen people-to-people exchange. We need to set up mechanisms for people-to-people exchange, and in climate change, we can seek opportunities in cooperation in green finance. And China also needs to strengthen intellectual property protection. CPTPP is the only free trade zone that has relatively comprehensive digital trade rules. So we need to continue to try to enter CPTPP so as to promote establishing rules for digital trade in China. We need to continue to push the progress in the opening up of the telecom industry. We need to create a framework of cooperation for MNCs in China. China and the U.S. can relax the limits on the access by foreign companies to domestic market. Chinese government should enhance exchanges with MNCs to explain the policies and relevant rules or regulations and strengthen IPR protection. Companies should fully study all possibilities and establish a crisis management mechanism to deal with the impact of crisis. When Chinese businesses account for a certain ratio of the MNCs, they should move certain management capabilities to China and to maintain good communications between the China operation and headquarters to maintain good understanding of the market. The companies should participate in corporate social responsibility, increase localization, and take more responsibilities. And companies should objectively view the current competition and government regulations. And also, companies should work with Chinese companies to go global and develop in third country. And we encourage companies to play a more important role in the bilateral relations. And we suggest that U.S. businesses in China should tell the stories of China-U.S. win-win cooperation. We also have electronic version for you to download. Thank you.